electrical and electronics, electronics and communication, information science, mechanical, biotechnology, MTech, MCA and PhD. NUTEC also collaborates with reputed universities around the world to give students an international academic exposure.
At NUTEC, the focus on research has not only helped me understand my subjects, but reach for the stars.
NUTEC offers a unique co-op program and exposure to architects, artisans and urban designers.
I aspire to
Medical programs like respiratory therapy technology, operation theatre technology, medical imaging technology, and medical laboratory technology.
I've always been curious about the chemistry of cures. I help in healing. From toddlers to seniors, I care for them all.
I believe I can help improve the quality of other people's lives.
We are blessed with the ability to speak and hear from birth. Not everyone is as lucky. I want to do my bit to help the less fortunate. I am proud to be able to assist a surgeon in the operation theatre.
From simple X-rays to sophisticated MRI and PET scans,
Assist radiologists and physicians. The training I have received in testing blood, tissues and body fluids assures me a job at any clinical laboratory. I help people enjoy every breath.
I believe in the power of research to change the world.
NUCSER is a one-of-its-kind teaching and research center that addresses society's health needs through painstaking research in biomedical sciences, food safety, microbiology, and biotechnology.
What I learn here and at my internship in the University of Minnesota, USA, I will carry with me and teach my community to live healthy and stay happy. We believe in being our own bosses.
The Bloomberg Lab helps students stay up to date with the latest trends in global markets. Students also have access to Bloomberg Analytics and can, in the course of their learning, develop their own analytics.
I cook my own recipe for success.
Sarosh Institute of Hotel Administration molds each student to become perfect hospitality professionals. A healthy blend of polish and panache.
I speak for the voiceless. This is what I'm taught, and this is what I'll practice.
I welcome you all to this webinar on World Food Day 2020. The Department of Science and Technology, through the Technology Enabling Center, is privileged to host this webinar. The day is celebrated with the theme, Grow, Nourish, Sustain Together. Our actions are our futures. It's my pleasure to accord a cordial welcome to Professor Dr. Vidya Karnasagar, our resource persons today, Professor Dr. S. Dave, Dr. Iram Rao, and also we have with us Professor Dr. Indrani Karnasagar. Professor Dr. Vidya Karnasagar is the appropriate person to introduce us the World Food Day. He is currently advisor, research and patents. He was the former senior director, international relations at NITE University in Mangalore, India. He was the senior fishery industry officer in the aquaculture and fishery department at Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations at Rome, looking after the area of quality and safety during 2007 to 2014. In this position, he worked closely with Codex Committee on Fish and Fishery Products and Codex Committee on Food Hygiene and was involved in the work of FAO-WHO Joint Expert Meeting in microbiology risk assessment. Prior to joining FAO, he served as a drafting member in FAO-WHO risk assessment for Vibrio species in seafoods. He served as a national professor of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. Sir holds the PhD degree in microbiology and has worked on several food safety problems associated with fish and fishery products as a microbiological pathogens and biotoxins. His research focused on ecology, virulence, and detection of foodborne pathogens. As a researcher, he has worked in several countries, including US, UK, Germany, and Japan. He has authored over 200 publications and over 2 dozens book chapters and 6 patents to add to his credit, and served as a member editor board of several international journals. He is a man of distinct vision and an idol of knowledge and experience, and an inspiration to all of us. May I now request Sir to brief us about the theme for World Food Day 2020. Over to you, sir.
So thank you, Mamta, and good afternoon to all of you, and a warm welcome to also Dr. Sanjay Dave and Dr. Iram Rao and all who have logged in. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce FAO and the theme today, because now we are celebrating World Food Day, which is the birthday of FAO, and it is a very significant point this year because FAO is on the 75th year. And FAO was established in 1945, immediately after the Second World War, when there was so much of destruction, death, and poverty, hunger everywhere. So the initial goal of FAO was to fight hunger. So you can see the logo of FAO, and you can see their fiat panis. Fiat panis means let there be bread. And now, of course, FAO is focusing on a number of other topics, including nutrition. And World Food Day is celebrated every year on October 16 to commemorate the foundation of FAO. Now, FAO as a technical organization of United Nations, WHO for health. Now, during COVID times, we hear a lot about WHO and what the WHO is saying. Similarly, FAO has a similar role with respect to food production, food safety. So FAO is a source of global data and scientific analysis, and there is focus on food systems, food safety, food security, nutrition, food loss and waste. So there are a number of guidelines and advisories produced by FAO in these areas, which are applicable in a number of countries. And FAO is also highlighting best practices in different countries and regions. And it's not sufficient to produce food, but it should be safe for consumption. So in this direction, FAO is working jointly with WHO in the standard setting, the Codex Alimentarius Commission, So we are very fortunate to have with us today Dr. Sanjay Dave, who was the chairman of this commission. And another standard setting body is the International Plant Protection Convention, which deals with pests and plant protection. So this is also hosted by FAO. So FAO is important in terms of number of roles with respect to food and food safety and food security. So FAO is also a source of database I mentioned. So you can get database in number of areas on regulations, because food is not only produced today, food produced in one country may be processed in a second country and consumed in the third country. So there's so much of international trade. So we need to know what are the regulations across the different countries. Now this is where the WTO SPS agreement comes important, and this is where food safety is given importance, and Codex Alimentarius Commission has been recognized as the standard setting body. Now there are how to understand regulations, national regulations. So today our eminent speaker, Mr. Sanjay Dave, will be talking about the evolution of national regulation in India, and see if you want to export to European Union or United States or Malaysia or another country, how do we know what are the regulations there? So there is a database of regulations and requirements in different countries, their policy. So this information one can access from the FAO website. And also FAO is coming out with a lot of dietary guidelines now for nutrition. So there were another important speaker today, Dr. Ram Rao, will be speaking about food processing and nutrition. So processed food is very important for nutrition. So what type of guidelines are to be used? So FAO is coming up with number of these guidelines. So these are all freely available. So all FAO documents are freely available. Now, though the initial focus of FAO was on hunger, but now there is more and more focus on nutrition, because it's not just sufficient to produce food. Even in India, we have achieved almost self-sufficiency in food production, but we still have hunger, which is now measured in terms of hunger index. So it's not just availability of food, there is distribution of food. So inadequacy of food supply, undernourishment. So hunger index is measured in these terms, and also in terms of child mortality, child undernutrition. So when we take these yardsticks, of course, India fares very badly. We are, I think in 2019, our rank was 102 among 117 countries. So we need to do a lot to improve our status in terms of hunger index and improve nutrition. So this gives indication on how we are faring in terms of the different yardsticks, proportion of undernourished in the population, prevalence of wasting in children under 5 years, and stunting in children, under 5 mortality. So these are all the yardsticks used in measuring the hunger index. So we need to focus on these issues on the World Food Day. Remember about how we can contribute into improving the situation, and the theme is grow, sustain, and nourish, and our actions are our future. So we need to think about our actions, so because the future generation will experience the result of our actions. So with this introduction to the theme, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sanjay Dave, who is a very eminent person, known internationally. He has worked in different parts of the world. He was with the Ministry of Commerce. He was the director. He has assumed different roles. He was the director of the Agriculture Product Export Development Authority, and then he was advisor to the agriculture in the mission of India in the European Union in 1996 to 1999. And then he was heading the Codex delegation from India initially, and then he was finally elected as the chair of Codex Alimentarius Commission in 2011, and this was the first time an Indian was elected to become the chair of Codex Alimentarius Commission. So he was the chair for 2011 to 2014, and he was managing the aspects of the work of Codex Alimentarius Commission during this period. And then after this term, then he was involved in developing national regulations in India as advisor to the Food Safety and Standards Authority. And now he is continuing to work in the international scene. He is currently international consultant to a number of organizations, FAO, WHO, International Trade and Development Facility. So we are indeed fortunate to have such a eminent person with us today to talk us about the national context on food safety. So over to Dr. Dave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karuna Sagar, for your very kind words, and thanks for inviting me today to speak on the occasion of the birthday of FAO, the World Food Day. And indeed, it's extremely important to look at various aspects of food production because that has an impact on nutrition, it has an impact on food security, it has an impact on trade, it has an impact on the entire economy of any country for that matter. So I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about all these issues and see what we can do in our country to improve and continue to improve the situation of food security and nutrition. So what I'm going to do is to make a short presentation to you. I have time until 3 o'clock and it is 2:12. I'll try and complete my presentation in less than 45 minutes so that there are certain opportunities for questions. And I do not know how these questions will be presented to me. Somebody will ask me these questions and I'll try and respond. Dr. Karuna Sagar, you can take a decision as to how this will be structured, but I will be happy to answer questions for sure at the end of my presentation. So let me try and share my presentation. I know Dr. Iram Rao is here and she has already seen this presentation before, but I think it is this kind of a presentation is always valid and live whenever we want to talk about food safety and food security. Is my screen visible? I just want to ask this question.
Yeah,
I'll put it on the slide.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm going to present to you is a case study about India as to how from where we started and where we are today. So this is how I've structured my presentation. You can see the India's food security situation, how has been the trade of our food products, what are our commitments under the WTO regime, and what actions we should take in India to improve whatever situation we are in today. So this is FAO data. This is based on FAO data. You see India is #1 in the production of milk, meat, millets, and the most important items like pigeon peas and chickpeas, and we are #2 in rice, wheat, pulses. So you see we are #1, #2, #3 in all the most important food products that we consume in our country, isn't it? So, but the situation is that in spite of the fact that our food production is so high, of course, we have a big population to serve and we also export from India. But in spite of the fact that we have such a large volume of production in India, the situation of health situation in India about 15 years ago was like this. See, so many children, 48% children below 5 years were stunted, chronic undernutrition. 54% of all deaths below 5 years were related to malnutrition. 69% children below 5 years, 58% pregnant women, 28% men were anemic. And so many children, women and men were underweight. And India had 1/3 of the world population, which is hungry. 1/3 of the world population is hungry, and they are in India, including hidden hunger, which means micronutrients deficiencies. And look at 26% of the population was food insecure. They consumed less than 80% of the energy requirements. So in spite of the fact that we produce so much, this was the health situation in India. It's such a bad situation. And look at our agribusiness. Our import was more than export. Import was $24 billion worth of food was being imported, and the export was just $22 billion. Global share was less than 1%, and export to developed markets was less than 14%. This is all in spite of the fact that we are the biggest producer in the world. So let us try to understand why exports have declined. Why exports have declined? The exports have declined because of non-compliance to standards of importing countries. We were not, and even today, some of our products, we do not comply with the standards of importing country. There is a lack of implementation of best practices, whether it is agricultural practices or manufacturing practices or hygienic practices or HACCP or whatever, traceability, and lack of cold chain infrastructure. So these were the reasons why our exports had declined, which means that there is a lack of commitment to food safety. And there has been a lack of awareness about international standards. And of course, lack of training too. But most importantly, commitment to food safety has been very minimal. Even today, you find various products which are non-compliant, not to talk of importing countries, even with our regulations. And this has led to a decline in negotiating power for market access with other countries. So try to understand, if the standards of the importing country is high and the standards of India are at a low level, they want to export to India and we also want to export to other countries. Where do you stand in terms of negotiating with them? That is the difficulty. And that is why our exports could not increase, because we had very limited negotiating power for exports for market access. Most of the time you will see products were getting rejected at various ports globally. Not just in Europe or United States or Japan, but also in many developing countries where we used to export, products were getting rejected. On the other hand, why import was increasing? The import was increasing because of better spending power. Lifestyles have changed. Today you get new products in the market. People travel abroad, so they like to eat new things, Italian or Mexican or Thai or whatever. And these products have come into the market. And we are getting aware of the need for better nutrition for our people. But if our standards are at a very low level, then whatever products will get imported into India will also not be very nutritious or safe. The principle of WTO says that the exporting country has to comply with the standards of the importing country. So if the standards of India are at a very low level, then whatever products will come into India will also be substandard. So if products are substandard that are being imported into India, it means that we have a lack of commitment to food safety. And we are not aware of international standards. Our standards, standards were not upgraded to international standards. We were at a very low level. So in both the situations when export is going down and import is increasing, the common denominator is lack of commitment to food safety and lack of awareness about international standards, coupled with lack of training. So, in the absence of a proper national food control system, if exports decline and imports increase, who suffers? The domestic market suffers. Consumers of our country suffer. And if the domestic market suffers, what happens? Hunger, Dr. Karuna Sagar was talking about. Poverty, less nutrition, wastage of food, substandard food production and substandard food getting imported into India, limited global negotiating position, decline in business interests, less tourists. If you have heard of a country called Lesotho, it is a very small landlocked country all around. It is there is South Africa. And I have been there. It's a beautiful country. I've been there 3-4 times. And I was having a breakfast meeting with a couple of their ministers. And I was told during that discussion that a lot of tourists come to Lesotho, but they stay in hotels in South Africa all around Lesotho. They eat food there. They hire taxis from there. They buy food there. Come to Lesotho for sightseeing. Go back in the evening to South Africa. So at the end of the day, while people do come for tourism purposes, what does Lesotho get in terms of foreign exchange? Nothing. And this was the concern of the ministers. They have hotels, but lack of food safety, lack of implementation of best practices. And this was the result. So any country for that matter, not just India, any country for that matter, if imports are increasing and exports are decreasing and imports are increasing, and there is lack of commitment to food safety, this is exactly what is going to happen. And if food is not safe, it means it will be wasted. And that leads to hunger and poverty. That leads to food insecurity. So what did India do? And how and with what result? India took a strategic approach. The first action was to set up a Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Before FSSAI, what used to happen? There was PFA, there was Ministry of Food Processing Industries implementing certain regulation, some other ministries implementing certain other regulations. There was duplication, there was multiplicity of regulations. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So a lot of confusion. There was no innovation taking place. Safety was not ensured. So the government took a very strategic decision that we need to have a single regulatory body in the country. And they set up the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Then, as Dr. Karuna Sagar said, we started working on aligning India's standards with international standards and improving participation in codex. Upgradation of laboratories was another decision. This is still continuing and will continue. And Dr. Iram Rao has done a lot of work, good work, in supporting the work of FSSAI, particularly in capacity building. So, why was this strategy adopted? You understand the reason why. Because we need to improve our situation. But what is the legal reason as well? Let's try to understand. We are a member of WTO. There is a SPS agreement, sanitary and phytosanitary measures. We are signatories to the WTO, and therefore we are signatory to the SPS agreement. SPS agreement looks after food safety issues, including the safety of plants, the health of plants, safety and health of animals, and safety of human beings. And every country has a commitment under the SPS agreement, and so does India. The agreement says, and we have taken that, we have signed that agreement, and we have said that whatever standards will be developed will be consistent with the SPS agreement, and the level of protection will be appropriate. It doesn't mean that you have a level of protection which exceeds your needs. And whatever standards will be framed will be science-based and not create unnecessary barriers to trade. I know there are several countries where unnecessary barriers to trade do get created because of trade interests. But the agreement says like this, and there have been several discussions in the WTO against decisions of certain importing countries that have created unnecessary restrictions to trade. And the SPS agreement also says that countries should base their standards or SPS measures on international standards. And the international standards under the SPS agreement are laid by 3 organizations. For plant health, it is IPPC, International Plant Protection Convention, based in Rome in the FAO building. For animal health, it is OIE, which is based in Paris. And for human health, it is Codex Alimentarius, which is also based in the FAO building in Rome. And in the case of food products, Codex standards have been taken as the reference standard in any dispute settlement. So the FSSAI Act also takes these into account. It is written in the FSSAI Act that we will base our standards on science. We will not create unnecessary restrictions to trade. We will align with international standards. All this is clearly written in one of the sections of the Act. I don't remember the section number, but it is clearly written there. I can show you sometime. So you see the preamble of the FSSAI Act, it says science-based standards. It comes from the SPS agreement. The SPS agreement comes from WTO. And Codex also talks about setting science-based standards to facilitate trade. And it is also written in our Act that we shall facilitate trade. See the regulatory elements. You know the strategy. Now see the regulatory elements under FSSAI. There's an FSSAI Act, which is for products, standards that apply to all the products, that is horizontal standards like food additives, contaminants, pesticide residues, microbiological contaminants, all that. Packaging, labeling, sampling, analysis, licensing, all these things. There is also a legal and notifications office. There is a scientific program coordination office. FSSAI has scientific panels. All these standards are set after risk assessment has been carried out by the different scientific panels, 21 scientific panels, both covering vertical and horizontal issues. And then there is a scientific committee. Dr. Karuna Sagar is the chair of a scientific panel, and by virtue of that, he is also a member of the scientific committee. Then enforcement and surveillance programs have not made much progress, but lately I am observing that some initiatives, some efforts have been taken to improve the enforcement activities. Surveillance really needs to be put in place in a big way in our country. Then there's a laboratory accreditation and certification program, state government training program. I personally go to several states to give training to their senior officers engaged in food regulatory work in the state governments. And I also go to different universities and colleges to talk about, to give lectures on the food regulatory system of India, then food frauds, risk analysis, and codex, all these things. I cover almost a very wide range of subjects in food safety areas to give these trainings. And then there is also an international cooperation program where mutual recognition agreements and equivalence agreements are organized, though not much has been done in these areas, but capacity building is one area where a lot of work has been done by FSSAI along with the partners. So these are the various things, these are the various departments within the institution that look after the regulatory system in our country. So the second strategy was to harmonize India's food standards that Dr. Karuna Sagar talked about. We started this work in 2012, early 2012, late 2012, early 2013, to upgrade India's food standards with international standards, that is Codex. And we looked at various existing FSSAI standards, regulations, to see to what extent they are aligned with Codex. Is there a need for upgradation? We compared them. Then we looked at various Codex standards for which various products or horizontal issues for which there are Codex standards, but FSSAI did not have the regulations. So we looked at all these things, and finally we decided that we will upgrade our commodity standards, that is the vertical standards, like fruits and vegetables, milk and milk products, fish and fishery products, meat, poultry, dairy, those kinds of things. Those are commodities that are verticals. And the horizontal standards which apply across all these verticals. For example, food additives, contaminants, pesticide residues, and various things that apply to all commodities, all products, fresh and processed. And the third was, as a part of this strategy, was to enhance India's participation in Codex. Because if you participate in Codex, only then you can look at your existing regulations and the need and assess the need for improving them, for upgrading them. You got to carry out risk assessment also, which is a very expensive process. And a lot of work is already being done by the 3 scientific expert committees of under FAO and WHO, which is JECFA, JMPR, and JEMRA. That is for food additives, contaminants, veterinary drugs, and microbiological contaminants. So they carry out these risk assessment activities and then set an international standard which are fit for adoption or adaptation by all countries. And that is what India also tried to do. It is not simple copy paste. We could have done this in 5 minutes. We did not need to spend too much time, but it took almost 4 years to complete the alignment process, the harmonization process of India's standards with the Codex standards. And today, we can proudly say that all our standards are aligned with international standards. And that has improved the situation, but we still have a long way to go. But why do we need to participate in Codex is to get international recognition, to be aware of what is happening globally, and to revise our standards. We also need to improve our market access, and we also want more tourists to come. And therefore, they should be able to, whenever they come, they should be satisfied that whatever food they will get from India, in India, will be safe, and they can also import it to their countries. See, it has an impact on everything, including tourism, trade. Then capacity building activities. Capacity building and training of food business operators, caterers, restaurants, food retailers, school canteens, midday meal providers, street vendors, laboratories. This work has been done by FSSAI. And as I said, Dr. Iram Rao has done a lot of work in these areas. And by the Surakshit Khadya Abhiyan, the National Mission for Safe Food under CII. Now, these two institutions have done a lot of work in raising awareness and giving training on best practices, good manufacturing practices, good hygienic practices, HACCP, and even good agricultural practices. So what was the result? This was that story that I told you about the health situation in India and the trade situation in India was 15 years ago. But then what changes have taken place? The health situation. This is also a few years ago, about 2-3 years ago data. It is not a very updated data. There has been an improvement. You can see the graph of stunting and underweight people and anemia going down. But let's not be happy about this. And FSSAI cannot take the complete credit. A lot of work has been done by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. But we still have a very, very long way to go. We have to bring this down to a very minimal level. We can't afford to have 59% children below 5 years suffering from anemia, or 50% pregnant women suffering from anemia, 36% underweight, 38% stunted. This is not a very happy situation. We got to change this as soon as possible. And all of us have to work in that direction. We will all have to work. Celebrating the birthday of FAO is one thing, but we've got to implement the thoughts of FAO and WHO and make sure that we make our children, we make our people happy. If our people are not healthy, they will not be happy. Situation in exports improved. Exports increased from $22 billion to $43 billion. It almost doubled by 2015, but then again it declined. Now in 2019-20, it has again picked up. It is now back to that level of about $44 billion, $44 and $45 billion. So exports have certainly increased by taking lots of measures, and most of the measures are all directed at improving food safety. Standards improvement, but also food safety, ensuring food safety and implementing best practices. Imports came down substantially. See, I gave you the data, $24 billion of imports. It increased to $34 billion. It is now come down to $19 billion. So while exports have doubled, imports have reduced substantially. Now exports is even more than double the imports. Now this is a much happier situation. This means that there is a lot of commitment to food safety. A lot of commitment has been given to food safety by our manufacturers and producers, and that is why our exports have increased. And that is why import of substandard food has declined. So if a food has to be imported into India, it has to comply with the standards of India and the regulations of India. And many countries have not been able to comply with India's regulations of food safety, and therefore imports have declined. So it has improved the balance of payment situation. It has reversed. Share of the global market has doubled from 1% to 2.2%. Export to developed market has more than doubled from 14% to 31%. Agribusiness, our GDP has increased from 14% to 17.3%. So this is how it has changed shape, just because some initiatives were taken, a strategic decision was taken, and a strategy was implemented in the country. However, with regard to the health situation, we still have a lot of work to do, and we all have to contribute. We all have to support these initiatives. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that our children are safe, our children are happy, our children are healthy, and do better things for the country. So what should be the focus points? What should be the action points? So one action point that clearly emerges from this discussion is that we got to implement best practices. Best practices at every step of the value chain, starting from the farm right up to the finished product, it comes to your plate. It has to be safe. We don't go and buy clothes every day. We don't buy medicines every day, but we eat food 3 times a day. So it has got to be good. And we got to improve traceability. Sometime when there is an opportunity, I'll give you a presentation on traceability. How we have implemented traceability in horticulture products to enhance exports. Several hundred-fold export in fresh horticulture produce has taken place just because we've implemented good agricultural practices and implemented traceability. We got to strengthen our food testing mechanism. This has been a bit of a weak area, particularly the state public health laboratories. There are private laboratories that are doing a great job, but state laboratories got to increase, got to improve. A lot of improvement is required for our state government laboratories. They are not in good shape, and that has to really improve. We got to bring in surveillance programs at all levels, not just by FSSAI, but all state governments. Everyone has to do that. Everyone in the regulatory system has to put in efforts. Not do surveillance programs during Onam or Pongal or Diwali or Holi. No, it has to be done round the year. And there are FAO guidelines, excellent FAO guidelines, Dr. Karuna Sagar can tell you. Excellent FAO guidelines on surveillance practices. Risk assessment. Data generation is extremely important. We are not really good at that. We got to change our current situation. Dr. Karuna Sagar, you would allude to what I am saying. You know that we've been a part of the scientific committee together on the same table, but the risk assessment process in our country really needs to improve. Scientific risk assessment is important. Data generation is important. Yes, we can depend on JECFA, JMPR, GEMRA, and the work done by other scientific FAO and WHO scientific bodies to generate data. There also we got to give data. If we want standards that meet our feasibility needs. But we should also set up a risk assessment mechanism in our country in a proper way. This got to improve. Some work is being done already in Ghaziabad laboratory, and FSSAI has already initiated program, but this has to be really taken up in a much better way. And this has to be done by, in my view, that is my personal view, it has to be done by a separate institution. There has to be a functional separation between risk assessment and risk management. This is how Codex does, this is how it has to be done. It should be done. There has to be a functional separation between assessment and management. Can't be within the same institution. It is a potential conflict of interest. Enhance interdepartmental coordination. That coordination, I sent a proposal to Mrs. Rita Tiotia when she was Commerce Secretary, and I suggested to her that we need to implement a coordination mechanism. We need to put in place a coordination mechanism where senior officers of Commerce Ministry, Agriculture Ministry, Animal Husbandry, Fisheries, FSSAI, export promotion bodies they should come together on a table at least once in a month and exchange information about various issues of market access, various issues of food safety, various issues of rejections, both in exports and imports, and try to take decisions that are helpful for the economy of our own country. So after some persuasion, she did set up a coordination mechanism. They started having meetings once in a month. I do not know, I'm not aware whether it continues or not, but this should be done. And finally, food safety education must be introduced. In every university, in every college that is giving undergraduate programs or postgraduate programs in food technology or nutrition or any field of food science. So as the chairman of the National Mission for Safe Food under CII, we initiated a program for developing food safety courses for India. So we designed 3 courses. One was one full semester program on food, focusing only on food safety, where you talk about everything related to food safety, including codex and other things. That should be a part of the 4-year or 3-year undergraduate program. So one semester should be devoted to food safety. So this was one module that was developed. The other one was a 1-year postgraduate diploma in food safety. A 1 full year program on food safety. And the third was a 6-month standalone program. So people who are pursuing their undergraduate programs can simultaneously make, probably students in the 3rd year or 4th year should take up the 6-month certificate course on food regulatory affairs, food regulations, not just India, South Asia, ASEAN, United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. What is the regulatory system in different countries? Eventually, people who come out of the colleges got to implement the food regulations, whether for the domestic market or for exports or imports, if they are working in India or they are working in Dubai, working in New York, wherever you are, you got to be clear about the food regulatory system, which is done globally. So we introduced this 3rd one, and then we thought that the faculty that is going to give this training in these 3 modules, 1 semester, 1 year, and 6 months regulatory program, they also need to be upgraded. So we designed a 15-day faculty development program. This was done in collaboration with some professors in Delhi and some people from the industry. And we designed these courses, and I sent it to the previous CEO of FSSAI, Mr. Pawan Agarwal, and I said, this is what we need to do. So he agreed. He took it to the board of FSSAI, and these were all approved by FSSAI board, by the Food Authority. And after that was done, he called a meeting with very senior officers of UGC and AICTE and invited several vice chancellors, where I made a presentation, and it was agreed that they will all implement these programs. So these programs are available on the website of the National Mission for Safe Food, that is Surakshit Khadya Abhiyan of CII. But in case you need, I can email these to you. I have got it with me. I can email it to Dr. Karuna Sagar, and then you could start implementing these. And the other colleges that are listening to this program, please think about it. Please implement these programs, introduce these food safety programs. We have a lot of courses on food technology, microbiology, nutrition, dietetics, whatever. But very one or two or three universities are giving education exclusively in food safety. Unfortunately, that is the situation, that is the reality, and we got to change this reality in our country. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for patiently listening to me, and I will be delighted to respond to questions. We still have 10 minutes to go, so we can take up some questions, and even later on, one can send an email to me, and I will be happy to respond. Thank you very much, and over to you, Dr. Karuna Sagar. Please.
Thank you, Ravi, for this excellent presentation and enlightening in many aspects. So now I think our moderators, I think they have been collecting questions.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so they will tell us about how we go about.
Okay. I think I will switch off my video. I think it is causing disturbance.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. Maybe we could take the questions at the end of the session, if time permits. Dr. Dave, you have emphasized on the fact that food safety is everyone's responsibility and a widespread collaboration and contribution of all actors across the food supply chain, underpinned by robust governance, agreed international standards, harmonized regulations, food testing, risk assessment and risk management are essential to food safety. Moving on, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker for the day, Dr. Iram S. Rao. Dr. Iram S. Rao is the Vice Principal and Head of the Department.
Interrupt for a second. Are we not taking the questions?
College of Applied Sciences, University of Delhi. She is an associate professor with more than 25 years of teaching and research experience and is the author of several textbooks on food science, food quality analysis, food quality evaluation, among others. She is the recipient of the Eat Right Award, a prestigious national award by FSSAI in the professional category. Besides, she's been a technical expert with World Bank and lead expert and senior nutrition consultant with European Union. She's an empaneled expert at Food Safety and Standards Authority of India for content development, training and capacity building initiatives for safe and nutritious food for school children and has trained more than 500 master trainers across India. Presently, she is a national level resource person for imparting training to food safety officers and is also a 4-stack trainer at FSSAI. She is also an advisory board of FICCI at the Center for Nutrition Excellence, steering committee member for National Mission on Surakshit Khadya Abhiyan, Confederation of Indian Industries. Dr. Rao is an executive member of NET-Profan and the immediate past president of Association of Food Scientists and Technologists of India, Delhi chapter. We are honored to have you with us, ma'am. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Iram Rao to deliver her talk on the topic, Innovative Food Processing Technologies to Accelerate the Growth of Food Processing Sector in India. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Febi. And please give me the presentation right so that I can upload my presentation.
We can't hear you, madam. We can't hear you. Please unmute yourself.
I have unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we still can't hear you. You have to be close to the microphone.
Okay, is that better now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think at least I can hear you, Dr. Iram Rao. I'm Dave here.
Yes, Professor. I hope we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sir, can hear me? So, should I come closer?
Yes.
I don't know. Is that better now?
Yes, it's a bit better. Yes.
Okay. Can you see my presentation?
No, ma'am. We can't see your presentation.
Can you see now?
Yes, ma'am, we can see. Yes, we can see.
All right.
Kindly make it full
Yeah,
screen.
I'm just making that. I hope I'm still, my presentation is still visible. Can you see
No,
the
not
presentation,
yet.
please? I think now it should be visible. I hope it's visible now.
Yeah, it's now full screen and visible to all. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. So firstly, good afternoon, everybody. I must thank...
We cannot hear you, Professor. We cannot hear you.
That's very strange. I don't know what to do.
Again.
I have unmuted myself. Everything possible I've done. So
I can hear you clearly, but I don't know why others are not able to hear you.
Sanjay Deval sure can hear me. I don't know, probably in one of the places. The rest of you can also hear me. If you can just put it on the chat box, please.
Now we can. Now we can.
So probably there's a lag, so maybe, it takes time or something. So if you give me permission, then I can begin.
Yes, please, madam, please.
Right. So at the outset, let me thank NITE University of Bangalore for giving me this opportunity and wishing everyone the best of the World Food Day. I have been listening to Sir Dave so intently, and sir, let me tell you that every time I hear, there's always a new perspective, and there is so much of learning from you. Professor Karuna Sagar, I owe it to you for organizing such a, an interesting seminar. Just not good quality food, but as the theme goes that we have to grow, sustain, and also learn to nurture. Just not for the food cultivation, but we need to be sensitive about our planet and the well-being of all the inmates. We must look after the planet well, conserve the natural resources, and do our bit to make this world a better place to stay. So as you can see today, I'm going to focus on the innovative food processing technologies, which will help India attain or accelerate the growth of the food processing sector. I think it's been time we have to now say that, yes, this is one of the segments, this is one of the sectors which is growing fast, but we still have to put in a little more effort. We can reach a status where India can be looked upon as the food basket of the world. And for that, I think the young and the prospective food technologists of tomorrow have to understand that what is going to give them the cutting edge. And for that, they must be familiar with the innovations in the area of food science and technologies. And that's what I'm focusing today on over here. Why is there a need for food innovation? What are the coming up or emerging food processing technologies? What's happening with the food packaging? How can we make it more sustainable? How can we get rid of that packaging material which is not compostable or biodegradable? What are these product innovations which are going to really lure the consumer? And what is happening as a revolution in the ingredient technology sector? So today's seminar is going to talk about all of this. Let's understand the first aspect. We have to ask ourselves why. And The why will be answered that, we have to continuously keep experimenting, because the consumers' needs are very dynamic. They never stay static. So gone are the days that we're looking for just another kind of, let's say, a snack food. No, we are looking for snacks even more than the yesteryears. But what are we looking at? We're looking at foods which are able to, we're looking at foods which have less amount of fat, do not have any added sugar to that, less amount of sodium. In short, the aware, educated consumer today is looking at food which is going to render health benefits. Nobody wants to buy another kind of food which is simply delivering the basic needs. We are looking at very specific and special needs. So as you know that India has turned out to be the diabetic capital of the world, and that is why you find that there's a surge in the demand of foods which are perhaps sugar-free, or per se we are talking about sodium reduction or trans fat-free foods. So all these are the added benefits, or these are the attributes which the consumer is looking for before making the purchase. And yes, we are conscious about, now there is a new classification called as NOVA classification, which classifies foods just not based on the ingredients, but it is talking about, that whether this particular food is minimally processed, does this have any added additives, is it highly processed, or it is ultra processed. And now the time has also come to look for safety from yet another perspective. Yes, the food has to be nutritious, wholesome, and at the same time now it has to be also allergen free. So food allergen labeling has become mandatory by the Food Safety Authority of India, and we know that this is a growing concern even in our own country. About 1 to 2% of the public is suffering from one type of the allergy or the other. And to top the list, it is peanut allergy. So you must very clearly label, and there is a need for clean labels also. So for all of this, we have to work on the improved processing technologies, and then only we'll be able to satisfy the consumer's needs. So the need of the hour, as we're talking about today, is that India has to stand up, become self-reliant, and what we are calling about is Atmanirbhar Bharat. And for that, very small, humble beginnings will certainly make all the difference. And what are these particular beginnings? If you look at just by this, I'm normally asked by the students that how can we reduce spoilage? How can we help in curtailing wastage? We can begin with our own houses. I can begin with my own plate. Stop wasting food. Sir has just pointed out that India is facing a triple burden of malnutrition. And one of the most worst affected segments is the vulnerable age groups. So on one hand, there are people who are going without food. On the other hand, there are excesses. And on the third vertical, we find that almost everybody is suffering from a micronutrient deficiency. So if we can just address even one part of it, can we help a person who goes without food to bed? So if I save this food, it will help at least, perhaps, feed one person. And also as students, as faculty on this prestigious day of World Food Day, can we all come together, join hands and take a pledge that each one learns to feed one. That is how we'll be able to make ourselves self-reliant and Atmanirbhar, especially in these challenging times where a number of people have lost their jobs as well. The second part is talking about we need to focus the development of improved processing technologies for preserving the foods. So as I just mentioned, look at hurdle technology, minimally processed food. Look at the innovations in the packaging where you actually bring down the role of temperature, bring down the role of additives. So aseptic packaging per se could be one of the answers to it. Yes, we have much more better packaging technologies also, but to get started with, we have to talk about that there has to be an improved processing technology so that the goodness of the food is not lost. When you express the juice out of the, let's say, oranges or the Malta, we know that my vitamin C is lost, the fiber is gone. So is there something I can do to preserve that and satisfy the needs of the consumer? The next point is that we need to identify eco-friendly and sustainable packaging. So as you know, the theme is just not nurture, grow and sustain, but it is also looking at the right kind of alternatives which will help us to do away with the single use of plastics. Look at alternatives, Can I go back to, developing my own, let's say the students can take very small projects in the laboratory and look at maybe just your banana leaf, how diverse it is in terms of its application. So in the earlier people used to have straws which can be made with it. Can I look at wrapping it also instead of using a cling wrap? Can I wrap my chapati in that after I have sanitized it, cleaned it, etc. So we must have to constantly search for alternatives and do not wait for that state-of-the-art laboratory to happen for us to take things to the next level. The next point is fortification of staple foods, and this is something the Food Safety Authority of India is doing it remarkably well, and very soon you would find a mandatory fortification of the staples. Why this has been done is, as I pointed out, that even us who are so-called from the affluent part of from the urban cities, we have access and regular supply of food, yet we find that because of the highly processed nature of the food, we have actually lost out on the nutritive value. So some of the essential micronutrients have been lost, and as a result today, we are going through an endemic problem of just not goiter or iodine deficiency disorders, but we also have a lot of people, let's say, suffering from vitamin D deficiency. You have to be dependent on the supplement. So can I have a food such as milk or oil which comes with the fortificant, both vitamin A and vitamin D, so that when I have my serving of milk, it has also taken care of my vitamin A and vitamin D. What about B12? A whole lot of vegetarians in our country, even if we are non-vegetarian, we do not have the right quantity to suffice for the nutritive value of the food. So yes, we are running short of proteins and we do need an alternative for B12. So if we can have a staple such as rice and atta, which comes with both iron and folic acid, but with that as dosage of B12, yes, I would be able to handle this particular deficiency well. And this is going to lead to what is called as the satisfaction of the consumer's needs. So one are your very basic needs like the staples, etc., and the special needs. So if you are hypertensive, I'm looking for not sodium salt, but an alternative salt. If I'm suffering from diabetes or if I'm overweight, I'm conscious of my extra calories, then I need to have food which is minus the regular added sugar, which you find is almost a mandatory thing, especially if you pick up any pack of biscuit or cookies, It does say it's a salty biscuit, but read the ingredients well and you would find that some amount of sugar has also been added to improve the taste. So these are some of the needs which you as students and we will have to work on it very, very deliberately. And then you have to cut the cost. And which cost are we talking about? The processing cost, but also the cost which comes when you're using energy. Now this energy, we have to look for alternatives for energy, but at the same time we have to look at processing technologies which will help us in actually curtailing the energy. So the first one is your novel food processing technologies, and I'm going to cover only the ones which you have not studied in your curriculum. So I'm not talking about what is freezing, what is refrigeration. I'm focusing on only the innovations in those particular segments. So in low temperature, application of low temperature, we have this kind of freezing which is termed as non-destructive freezing. It is discovered by the Japanese, and it is called as cells alive system. Now this is a very interesting way of preserving the food. What you need to do is that the food is first subjected to very low intensity magnetic field, such as putting it, and thereafter it is being frozen, using either flash freezing or blast freezing. So what happens is that the food, normally when I freeze, I need to blanch the food and thereafter put it into the deep freezer with -18 at least degrees Celsius. Now this food actually loses its texture because of the drip loss. There are changes in the nutritive value, so there would be some color change, there would be nutritive losses. But in this case of non-destructive freezing, can you see over here that all your very delicate kind of fruits can be very easily frozen, and they do not lose their appearance, their color, their texture, and the most importantly, the drip loss leads to nutritive loss. So whether it is your fish or the seafood, or whether it is your delicate fruits like kiwi, strawberries, blueberries, cherries, all of these can be very, very easily taken care of by this particular method. The next one is called as superheated steam. Now all of us have seen a microwave and an electric oven, but this is with a difference. This is called as electric superheated steam oven. So what principle does it operate on? The steam is produced at a high temperature, which is naturally more than the boiling point. And what it does is that this is basically going to take off the excess amount of inherent fat, invisible fat, which is there in your product, and together with that salt content. As you know that the non-vegetarian food is very high in the fat content, inherent fat content, and also the salt content. So this is a wonderful alternative for your barbecue food. So whether it is your tikkas, or whether it's your roast or broiled foods, or even your French fries, we get all subjected to the superheated steam. And what's going to happen? The advantage is that it is rapid, efficient, and also it removes my excess amount of fat and salt. You can also apply it to the dehydration of the fruits. The next one, I think we are familiar with this, high pressure processing. We do have some companies today which are marketing high pressure processing, or what is called as cold processing treatments or cold pasteurization. So it is normally applicable to those foods which used for the solid foods. So in this case, you can actually pack the food, introduce it on this particular conveyor belt, and subject it to this hydrostatic pressure. So here the food has been exposed to about 600 megapascal, but for a very short period of time, which is about 6 minutes or so, and thereafter it is exited. So in this particular process, again, what is the advantage? The food is frozen, the microorganisms are killed, and your enzymes are inactivated. But the good part is that you do not lose upon the lower molecular weight compounds such as your flavor giving agents, your vitamins, pigments, etc. And that is why the standard or the quality of the food which is preserved using high pressure processing is much more superior. It retains its freshness, its sensorial properties or organoleptic properties, nutritional properties, and it is ideal for heat sensitive fruits. So can you see over here that when you want to extract the juice, if you subject it to the HPP, it is going to firstly increase the output, and number two, the food will retain the goodness of the fruit itself. It also destroys pathogens such as these, Salmonella, Vibrio, etc. Now the next technology, which is called as supercritical fluid extraction, is not really novel, but its applications are pretty novel. So you know this, that here we are going to use carbon dioxide, right, which is going to be, this is basically used for the separation process, and you're going to compress it above the critical pressure, that is 50 to 250 bars. And the application is that whenever you want to decaffeinate coffee or tea, or when you want to extract some of the nutraceuticals from spices, herbs, or perhaps when you have some of the NUCs, naturally occurring toxic substances, which today we are looking into very, very carefully, such as toxic alkaloids, which are present not just in your potatoes, but let's say even in some of your foods such as almonds, etc. So the bitter component, which is toxic alkaloid, can very easily be actually separated through this particular process. It is also being applied to the debittering of the fruit juices. Another example is when you want to actually debitter, if you look at sapota or chiku, even today in the market, we do not have a dehydrated, ready to eat, drink beverage out of that, or let's say milkshake, because that when you dehydrate it, the bitter compounds get concentrated, the bitter pith is going to make the dehydrated pulp inedible. But with this technology, we are able to get rid of the bitter components. The next technology is called as sous vide, and this is very significant. And why this is very significant is that it is being repackaged and given back to us, none other than the Japanese. Now, if you speak to your grannies and if you speak to your great-grandparents, or if your parents also, they would tell you that in the olden days, the traditional method of cooking the food, which required long time cooking, was that they used to keep it in a handi or in a pot, which was made up of clay, right? So one, the advantage was that it would not, the metal ions would not leach, right? Number two, they would have controlled cooking for a long duration of time. So the same principle is being employed by sous vide also. They're packaging the food in the airtight bags, putting it into a water bath, as you can see over here, and they do a long hours of cooking. But what is important is that they do not increase the temperature. So when they used to be done with cooking, the fire was put off, it would still have some amount of heat in terms of the burning coal. So they would put the, the pot up on the fire. So if you speak to people who make curry out of that, a lot of people who make some, exotic dals, and this practice is being adopted today by the hospitality sector. If you want, you can ask for these specially colored vegetables because it retains its original color, flavor, taste, etc. If you want to cook it at such temperature, this comes with a thermostat and a timer, and you can also buy this kind of a cooker which can be used in the laboratory as well. The advantages, as you can see over here, is that it does not overcook, retains its freshness, its natural appearance. It does not lose out the nutritive value because there's hardly any drip loss. There's no shrinkages, and also it prevents the nutrient loss. So this is how you can actually preserve the food and keep it for a longer duration in your freezers. Food nanotechnology is, as you know, the study of materials at nano scale. It exploits the fact that some of the materials have different properties at this ultra small scale. So I'm sure a lot of people must have read about, use of biosensors, let's say for detection of pathogens. You have PCR machines where you can figure out if there's an adulterant in them. You have electronic noses, you have electronic tongues, right? So what happens is that your human nose tends to get saturated when you use it for a long period of time. And because of this saturation, you're unable to give the difference or discern the difference between two compounds. And that is why electronic nose does not get saturated. We can, examine hundreds of samples, particularly in a day, which a human being cannot do that. So this is one of the objective methods of actually evaluating the food, which can be used through this particular, technology. You also have quantum dots in biosensing. So bioanalytical applications are there where these applications have been used, and a lot of interesting research in the domain of food science and technology is taking place. For instance, you can see that silver nanoparticles already have it out there. Commercial water purifiers have it. They will scavenge the microbes, and that's how the quality of the water can be improved. Another example is that of encapsulation nanotechnology. So all of us have known about emulsions. You have, emulsion which can be like, oil in water and vice versa. But here we are talking about basically a double emulsion. So how is this a double emulsion? What you can do is the food can be encapsulated in the central core, right? It will be then it will be then encapsulated with two layers. Can you see this one in pink and the other one number 2? Now this improves actually the stability and more importantly the bioavailability of this particular delivery material. Now I'm not talking about really chocolates over here and mint filled and whatever flavor filled. We are talking about that what is going to happen from next gen on. So today we have, for instance, edible vaccines. And you know that, when you put those polio drops in the mouth of the child gets anxious, starts crying, and some of the important vaccine is also lost out. Now think of a type that you can develop an edible vaccine with the help of the edible encapsulation layer. So you can put in the vaccine, the deliverable compound, let's say a probiotic, a prebiotic, so that you are 100% sure that it is delivered in that quantity and is also assimilated in the body. So this is how we'll be able to actually make a difference in the coming days, and for this we need to start thinking out of the box. So these layers are made up of PLGA, which stands for polylactic glycolic acid, and this is how the delivery of the nutrient can be then made sure. So encapsulated, you can have candies alternatively, but in this case what we can do is that we can actually fill it up with mango pulp. So there is no need to sweeten the pulp. The actual pulp of the mango can be taken, or any fruit for that matter. Areas of, let's say, your pomegranate can be taken, and that's how what we can do is make the delivery of the important nutrients easy. Radio frequency heating is the next technology which I'm talking about, and this application, really speaking, is in bulk heating and also in baking, pasteurization and sterilization. I'll give you one example. For instance, if you look at you want your product to be really nice and crisp. So what can be done is, and what is being now applied is, through this RFID technology, the last cycle of the baking of the biscuits that helps you to cut the cost. So you can routinely bake it, or you can conventionally bake it in the normal oven, the convection oven. But the last cycle can be put into this RFDI chamber. So what happens is that it removes that extra moisture, right? And then when you package the product, you find that the product lasts well, it is much more shelf-stable, and it is also far more texturally acceptable by the consumers. The next one is going to be focusing on spray crystallization. So this is another technique where you can fill up the material over here. As you can see, with the help of the pump, you can actually spray this particular food. So what happens, immediately the liquid solidifies, and thereafter what happens is, because of this texturization, solidification of the food, it is very important, it is very easy rather to actually make powdered preparations, right? So this particular technology is applied to, let's say, some exotic spices and condiments. You know that today we are talking about improving immunity, right? And people are suggesting that, let's say, cinnamon plays a very important role. True, but can I take that cinnamon and put it into my domestic grinder and then put it into my tea, coffee or water, whatever? What happens is 50% losses takes place. Why? When I grind it in the dry grinder, the evolution of the exothermic heat kills the volatile substances, and the flavor is also compromised. So can I have this particular technology where I not only retain the goodness of my food or my commodity, but at the same time the resultant product, the powder, is also so fine that I'm able to use it into my sprinkler, or otherwise it is going to retain the goodness of those nutraceuticals for which I'm consuming it. Ultrasonic processing and ultrasonic techniques are also being used. So you know that they have applied for microbial inactivation. We do have biosensors, and these are non-destructive techniques. So one of the applications is being used in meat tenderization, sterilization, crystallization, etc. But I'll give you one interesting technique, that today when we are going to, let's say, when you're training the farmer, Dr. Dave talked about, that we have to now shift to good hygiene practices, good manufacturing practices. We have to also actually help and train the farmer to adopt protocol as good agricultural practices. We have to also curtail the food losses. So think of a scene where you have a crop which is ready to be harvested. I'm talking about specifically a fruit crop. So think of, let's say, orchids. Any orchid, maybe mangoes or guavas or apples are ready. Generally, what the farmer does is he actually picks up a particular tree, and from the periphery of the tree, he will pick up one fruit, right? If that fruit is done through a simple flotation test, he comes to know that whether it is ready to harvest or not. But in turn, he ends up losing, tens of kgs of that particular fruit. But can I have now today a portable handheld device based on the ultrasonic technique? I can go next to the tree and take the images. I can just turn it around over there, And what's going to happen, this is going to quickly take the magnetic resonance of that existing tree, compare it to the standard which is being already fed in of a perfectly ripe fruit or horticulturally mature fruit, right? And what is going to happen, the farmer would get a green signal that yes, this is good to go, you can go and harvest it. The next one is non-thermal plasma. Now, plasma is basically an electrically energized matter in a gaseous state, and this can be very easily generated with the help of an electric discharge. This is primarily being used to decontaminate products which are heat sensitive and also helps in the inactivation of the microorganisms both on the surfaces of the fresh and the processed foods. So think about it, during the current COVID times, what are we most concerned about? We're talking about sanitization. We're talking about, keeping an environment clean. We are so concerned when we buy food packets from outside that we wash it with soap water, we sanitize it, we wipe it dry, and then only we consume it. So have we got this kind of a thing also as a screening mechanism placed on every retail store? So when you're exiting, all the food goes into that particular conveyor belt, and what you get at the end over here is you collect your commodity which is going to be free of any kind of surface contamination or microbial contamination per se. The next one is very interesting. It is called as static and oscillating magnetic fields. Now, these can also be generated using alternate current electromagnets within pulse fields. This is again a very important method and very useful. Why? Because it is a non-thermal method of treating the food. So you can get rid of the microorganisms, you can inactivate them, and at the same time you do not compromise with the the fresh-like attributes or with the organoleptic properties of the food, and also you are able to conserve the energy. Remember, one of the things to do is that we must look at processing alternatives which helps us conserve the energy, and that's why today we are emphasizing that eat local, eat regional, right? Of course, we're not saying stop buying from outside, but please do understand that for sustainability it's important that we conserve our resources, right? Cut down your carbon credits, right? And then only our world is going to change for the better. The next one is the technologies which are going to keep the food fresh. And I would want to tell the students who are attending this webinar that please remember one thing, there is no innovation without experimentation. And we are living in a world of innovation. Every day we read about innovations, we hear about innovations, and we need to keep innovating, and taking baby steps in your simple laboratories is the way ahead. So when you innovate, you disrupt, and there are n number of examples out there that simple innovations have completely changed the course of time. And that is why, and one underlying factor which I would like to highlight is that if you fail, do not get disheartened. If you experiment, you're bound to not get your results right, but continue that particular process. And that's how we are saying consistent is important. Continue experimenting, and you will be able to reach the ladder of success very soon. One of the suggesting things which is not really in the purview of this particular webinar, but I thought I would share with the students is that design thinking is one of the methods which have been suggested in the pedagogy of higher education. So design thinking projects actually help the students cultivate problem solving skills. And how do they do that? You don't have to look at what the consumers need. You have to go the other way around. You have to walk to the consumers, take simple questionnaires, speak to them and find out what is it they are looking for in the market for. What is it, what kind of foods they would love to buy? Because let me tell you that today's consumer is willing to pay a higher cost provided his needs are met. I did say basic needs, yes, we have enough for our basic needs, but for specialized needs, there is a complete gap out there. So when you collate this data and then when you start working backwards, you would come to know that there's so much you'll be able to pack. One of the suggestions which I've written over here is that in Food Safety Authority of India, they have a particular vertical which talks about RUCO. I'm sure most of you must be knowing about it. This is basically repurposed cooking oil. So there is one particular fact we're saying is that cut down your trans fats. One of the ways we are getting trans fats in our food chain is when you continuously keep frying and refrying the same oil, right? So what we need to do is that from the commercial organization, when the total polar compounds are about 25% or more, we need to be changing that oil. So can we have a collation where you would collect this particular oil, and this can be actually used for the preparation of biodiesel? So that's a win-win situation from both the sides. We're not talking about the domestic kitchens throw away the oil, but what you suggest to them is that you can use it for making some other foods or curries, etc. But do not use the oil when the color is changed, it's become dark and very, very viscous. So simple things like these can be picked up, and there would be a change coming in soon. The next part is talking about your delivery systems which can be helped to extend the shelf life. So I'm going to talk about all this. What all can be done? So one of the innovations in this is, one of this particular technology, as you can say, is that you can actually spray it. Today we are using sanitizers, surface sanitizers to spray everything. So can we look at an antimicrobial solution which can be used by the sabzi walas, which can be used by the vegetable hawkers and vendors who are selling in small carts? Can we give them that? They all fill up some water from somewhere, from some unpotable source, and they keep splashing it on the vegetables. So not only the quality goes down, but you also find that there's a lot of wastage which is happening over there. So I know a professor in IIT Delhi who's working on this particular technology, where he has made an antimicrobial solution which can be actually put into a bucket. So all that the person has to do is just dip it into that. So this prevents the spoilage by bacteria, it prevents cross-contamination, it kills the pathogens, and it is used both for the batch processing and otherwise also for the continuous in the processing plants. The other one which is suggested is for your green leafy vegetables. I'm sure all of us know that they are the ones which get affected the first. So within a few hours you find that the color goes, they start wilting, they become limpless, etc. So this electrostatic spraying of antimicrobials can be done in a chamber, something like this, like you have an laminar airflow. So this actually covers it, and it helps to retain the crispness of the vegetables. Now let me tell you that these are simple things which we are doing in our laboratories, and I'm sure a lot of students can start working on these examples which I'm giving you. So what is happening over here? The delivery of the the antimicrobials per se is being done at a nano level, right? Can you see how this is functioning? So this is how it goes and coats the surface. So you know that nanotechnology is nothing but you're working at probably an atomic, molecular or a submolecular level, and that's where you find that you would make a difference. For food packaging, I'm just going to highlight some examples because I will not be able to cover all. So the way forward today is that people are accepting edible films or edible packaging. So we can look at the byproduct utilization also. Can we look at the seed cake which is left after the oil has been expressed, such as say, let's say soya seed cake or any other seed cake of a particular thing. So this still has very high percentage of protein, as you know that, right? So this would help you to make a film, right? Where what we're trying to do is, my next slide will show you that you're actually unfolding it. So just by subjecting it to simple temperature raise, right? So this is my native protein. I subject it to a high temperature, and this is how I have an unfolded film. And this can be now used for multiple applications, right? So either I can, as I've said, that you can have a coating agent like tryptophan, or you can have any of your own designed ones, right? Where what you find is that basically the intermolecular disulfide bond is formed, a hydrogen band which is hydrophobic, and this is where you have an edible film which can be extruded out, and then can you see these tomatoes or apples or whatever can be actually covered with that. So we are not talking about paraffin wax over here, we are talking about edible films which are nothing but proteins. They are edible and they are not harmful when you consume them. Some other examples, like, as you can see over here, are that I like this one very interesting, that where you can have an edible cover, and in this you can fill up the liquid, right? You can put a straw to actually sip the liquid or the puree or whatever, right? And eventually, if you want, you can even, consume the shell as well. So these are some of the interesting examples. You know that the future of packaging has to be sustainable. Nobody is looking for plastics. Nobody is looking at petrochemicals. Nobody is looking at byproducts of petrochemicals. So this is what it does to you. It can be based on all of this. It can give you flavor, color, nutrients can be retained, and a lot of other advantages, as you can see over here. So edible film coating, can you see the difference between a pizza which has been wrapped with an edible film and the plastic film? Who wants to put this pizza into the microwave, and then that even if you're not heating it with the film on, that the plastic or the polymer is not inert. It is reacting all the time. And food also is nothing but a chemical, and what's going to happen? The interaction is going to lead to problems. And we know that how the country is facing problems with some of the very, very, very deadly diseases. So some of the examples, like edible crockery and cutlery, can we have, a CCD or a coffee outlet where you can have, like the way we eat ice creams, So we eat it with the cone. So can I have a cup which is very easily made, with all these particular, and can I tell you the secret, what is being used over here? These are nothing but the multigrains, right? So they are rich in fiber, they give you micronutrients, and of course you can design your own cutlery. Nobody wants plastic spoons, but we are willing to pay slightly higher, and these spoons are also made up of nutriceuticals or multi-nutrients. So very simple way of actually making the child eat that. Once you finish the soup, you can eat up your spoon as well. Now, this is not really related to food technology, but we can certainly extend our services to the other industry as well. We know that roses are in all the time. So can you see that? The ones which have been coated with the edible film, they last you for a month. And these do not even, this is like when you have controlled temperature. So during summers, within 2 days, they start wilting and you lose them. But can you see this? We can actually extend the shelf life. So again, we are talking about sustainability. We are not going and harvesting yet another crop of the flowers and growing them. So these are some things which you can add to your list. Some of the recent advances which I want to highlight, because now the revolution is taking place in terms of the technology of the food ingredients. I know all of us are familiar with this, that yes, motherless meat is here for real. This is plant-based. It can be actually grown on a petri plate, and we know that this is a sustainable option for the meat industry. A lot of people in India are excited about it. I know a lot of people at the startup levels are working on it, and people are really welcoming this particular change. So we can work at some other nuggets and tikkas and things like that. So not just the cutlet. The next one is 3D printing. Yes, this is a reality, and as I said, the special needs of the consumer is, imagine a patient who's in the hospital, has problems swallowing the food, right? God forbid, has had a terminal illness or has some problem with his oral route. So what they do is they feed you through the parenteral route, right? Or perhaps we're talking about a child, or you're talking about an elderly or a person, as I said, who's not well. Can we print the food like this? Yes, it is a possibility. And yes, it is a possibility in India. We have 3D printers, and they are giving you the alternatives for, and this technology works like, can you see this? This is like a small mixer, right? Where you put your blend in it. And what is this blend like? Like you work with an extruder. What you do is you prepare a dough, right? And you put all your ingredients in there. So let's say I can make this with my multi-nutrients. I can put my cereals, I can put my nutriceuticals, I can put my additives in terms of, I'm talking about spices, flavoring agents, etc. And I can extrude this. I can print it out with the help of the printer, which is now also available in India. The only thing which you need to do is then put it for drying, right? So this is put into the microwave for drying. The experiments have been done over here in India by the Indian Institute of Food Processing Technology. They have come up with a commercially viable and economical alternative as compared to the rest of the world, and you can enjoy the goodness of it. Some of the novel food ingredients which I thought that the students would be interested in is that we have enough of this hibiscus flower growing. Can you see this flower? I think we are familiar with this flower. Like, this flower is multi-nutrient. So can we look at now today flowers to extract their flavors, colors, right? Because research indicates, and I'm quoting research papers only from that, it has considerable health benefits in terms of controlling blood pressure and cholesterol. Now, vegetables is a huge problem when it comes to children being fed with it. So now today the technology is making you actually develop vegetable extracts which are taste-free. That means you can still enjoy your pumpkins and your turnips and all those foods which you would hate to eat without tasting like them. So your carrot, pumpkin, sweet potato, any of that can be put in. But what is what is the good part of it? It will give you the goodness of those particular vegetables. So can you think of it? That all my beta carotene, all my anthocyanins, etc. in abundance will be there. Because as the Eat Lancet Commission plate or the Eat Right plate of FSSAI is pointing about, that it is the plant food diet which is the future. And I think Indians have proven this centuries ago that the best of the type of the diets is coming from the plant kingdom. It is healthy, it is sustainable, and it is the way forward for those people who are suffering from all kind of health problems. So another one over here is that, as I talked about, that encapsulation technology is being used. All that they've done is that, the areas of the pomegranate have been coated with this dark chocolate, and this gives you the right crunch. But when children have problems consuming probably a particular fruit, this can be done in a very simple fashion, and that's how mothers would have some good alternatives than just feeding, chocolates which are good for nothing, so to say. The next one is my favorite, and this is called as Delayed Release System Easy Wake Up Formula. So this is a time engineered technology, right? The name is very long, but don't get confused with that. I'll explain it to you. Now, we normally, have cups of coffee and tea to keep ourselves awake in the night, especially students need to study for their exams, we need to submit your assignments, etc. But when you drink a lot of coffee, it dehydrates you. And number two, what happens is then for you to fall back to sleep becomes a challenge. Now, this interesting coffee would help you to actually only get the shot of caffeine after 7 to 8 hours. So like when I have this coffee, after 8 hours, the caffeine will be released and this will be like my wake up call. So I don't have to put up the alarm. The caffeine will make me rise up. So you will not any longer miss your deadlines or rushing up for your that important exam for which you have to be half an hour at least before time. This is one I wanted to share that one of my students is working on, So we are promoting Startup India, Stand Up India. So our department in a very humble way is trying to have an entrepreneurs, cell where we encourage students to take up very, very small projects which we are able to do hand holding with. So one of them has actually come up with this, these edible crockery. But more significantly, we also do we do products on byproduct utilization. So we grew, button mushrooms on coffee waste. And this particular project won one of the best projects out of, I think a whole lot of them which were actually displaced in 2018 and got an award by the Honorable Prime Minister of the country, Shri Narendra Modi ji, for 25 lakh rupees. So let me tell you, it was a very humble beginning. We only could provide about 3,000 rupees to the students, a group of students rather. And now that is in the incubation facility. I know mushrooms are very popular in urban cities at least, but we've been able to use the coffee waste, which is normally rubbish, which is just normally thrown off. So it's very nutritious. It has an amount of proteins, and that is how we could get that. So that is how when students, and you continue to study, we're not saying drop out after half, of your graduation or post-graduation. Keep working, keep having these particular interests alive. And now it's much more simpler. You can just have your own platform out there, and you can, have your, exercise continued. So this is where we are. What my suggestion to the department would be that, yes, encourage your students. You have various ways of doing that. But one of the interesting methods and a successful one with that is actually partnering with the industry. so that you can have an MOU with the industry where, you know, it is a win-win situation for both. You work on the product development, or you work on product renovation, or perhaps, you know, a new startup idea by itself, you know, right from the, you know, from stage one to actually retailing and marketing as well, you know. So that would help you to actually carve a niche for yourself. It, yes, is important to have that passion and dedication, and which I can bet that every faculty, you know, every teacher who's chosen this profession, I think that comes very naturally, and students have to be just encouraged, you know. So creativity, creation, innovation, and enterprise is actually the way forward, you know. So there is no shortcut, there is no you know, formula set for that. It is the effort which goes in will pay rich dividends, you know. With that, it is a wrap. Thank you so much for your rapt attention. I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you so much once again having me over.
Thank you, Dr. Iram. It's always a pleasure listening to you. And you have stressed that innovative technologies are key to building more resilient and robust food systems. And as countries begin to develop and implement COVID-19 recovery plans, it's an opportunity to adopt these innovative solutions so that we can build back better and improve our food systems. Thank you, ma'am, so much. Dr. Eden, could you please stop presenting? Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Food can never be complete without water. To tell us about the role of water, we have with us our own Dr. Professor Indrani Karnasagar. Professor Dr. Indrani Karnasagar is a renowned scientist in the field of microbiology. Madam is currently the Director Project of DST-NUTEC. She was former Director of Research and Development in Center for Science Education and Research, Native University, Mangalore. Her academic career spans across 4 decades, begins from KMC Manipal, Jipmar, Pondicherry. She was a professor and head of the Department of Microbiology, College of Fisheries, Mangalore. Her overseas experience includes postdoc at University of Stirling, UK, UNESCO Biotechnology, fellow at University of Maryland, University of Baltimore. She is the director of UNESCO Center of Biotechnology, scientific advisor, International Foundation of Science, Stockholm, Sweden. She is vice chair of International Jury for UNESCO Life Science Prize for Research and Social Relevance. She is also a recipient of several prestigious and coveted awards such as National Technology Development Award, Government of India. To name a few, she is bestowed with Fellow of National Academy of Agriculture Science, Sir Vishwesvaraya Award for Excellence in Research and Lifetime Contribution to Science and Technology, Government of Karnataka. Rafiq Tidbai Award, ICR, Outstanding Women Scientist, National Bioscientist Award, Government of India. Life Science Achievement Award, DBT. Asia Pacific Award for Eminence in Aquatic Virology. To her credit, she has 300 publications in her high impact factor journals, edited 3 books, and guided 40 doctoral and 40 master students who are occupying prestigious positions in industry and academia in India and abroad. With over 8,570 citations, H-index of 49, and I-index of 154, she is a legend herself. May I now request Madam to address us on water and public health. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mamta. You rightly said there cannot be any food without water. And we have all realized and often heard how water is the elixir of life. Our human body is made up of 70% of water. But then there is the other extreme where we talk about water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. We've heard all such statements which make us realize how important water is in our daily life. To grow food, you need water. And a seminar such as this, where there were elegant topics spoken on regulatory aspects, on processing, it is only in the fitness of things that we have water and its role in public health included. Now, when we talk about water and when we look at the theme of this year's World Food Day, we know, they talk about grow, nourish, sustain, all this together. But for all of this, water is required. We cannot grow food without water. And it is here that we need to know about the quality of water. Having said that, there's not a day that passes without hearing on the various water purification systems appearing in the television or in any other media. And it seems very strange that something that didn't exist so much 30 years ago is an order of the day today. We dread to drink water that is not purified. We talk about drinking water only from water bottles, which are pre-sterilized or which have mineral water in them. And as a microbiologist, maybe my focus will be more on thinking about the microbial pollutants in water, but we realize that water has a lot of other pollutants that get biomagnified. Now, this biomagnification happens through the food we eat, the soil from where agriculture products grow, the quality of the water where fish grow. All of this becomes very important. So without much ado, maybe I will just focus a little bit on why water has become so important. We know World Water Day is celebrated year after year, and UNICEF had this image, but we also know for this drinking water, people have to tread miles in some parts of our own country, forget about other countries also like Africa. And where there's plenty of water available, people do not drink so much water. They are happier with less problems drinking beer rather than water. Having said that, what are all the sources of water pollution? Now, here are some images that will show a sewage outfall and that will show runoff from the land to the sea and anthropogenic waste, domestic waste that get carried. You could have any industry located on the pond sides that carry with them some of the effluents containing harmful chemicals, and there is really no end to thinking what are all the sources of chemicals that find their way to the water, because it essentially depends on the industries. If it is a textile industry, there could be dyes and bleaches that are there. If it is an industry producing dyes, there would be certain other chemicals that find their way. If it is a petrochemical industry, yes, there would be some hydrocarbons. Nature does take care of all these pollutants when they are in minimal quantities. But when they exceed the power of the environmental organisms, particularly, that have been rendering human service in cleaning up the mess, we realize that biotechnology comes to the fore, in which the same useful organisms are sometimes loaded in larger quantities to take care. So I will briefly touch on some of the aspects. Now, one example, people have spoken about, yes, the land foods. Now, if you look at seafood, about which we heard Dr. Karuna Sagar speaking, Dr. Dave, and I saw even in Dr. Iram's presentation when she spoke about the different techniques for processing them, we found seafood, fish being used also by the same methods. Now, seafood is very important because it contributes, yes, to food security, but also to nutritional security because of the irreplaceable quantities of protein that you find in them, other essential nutrients, and all of this becomes especially important in many parts of the world. Yes, India is no exception because we have a vast coastline and the capture fisheries, which is stagnated, has given rise to culture fisheries where a lot of fish and other seafood is cultured artificially. Now, hazards that are associated with fishery products, yes, can be categorized depending on whether they are microbial, whether they are biotoxins that are products that algae, which due to eutrophication of the waters may develop to large quantities and then result in blooms and consequently toxins that may find their way through some of the shellfish to humans. So these biotoxins can be a hazard. There could be chemical contaminants, and then there are certain fish that are naturally toxic with some such as tetrodotoxin in them, like the pufferfish, which is a neurotoxin. Coming to bacteria itself, you have some agents that are autochthonous to the aquatic environment, but when they are pathogenic with certain attributes, they result in illnesses that are of great significance. Now, some illness may be gastrointestinal. Rather, most illnesses become gastrointestinal when it reaches through the GI tract, causing the problem, but some of them also may find their way externally through wounds and result in fasciitis and in other serious conditions of cellulitis. Now, E. coli is one such organism where we always speak of it as being an indicator of fecal pollution. But today, the number of species of E. coli that have pathogenic properties are far now outnumbering what is generally found. And some of course, every one of us must have at some time or the other experienced traveler's diarrhea. You just travel from one place to another and rightly named so, you end up with diarrhea by the time you reach your destination. Now, all this has come from the water or from the food where some water was used to maybe dilute whatever was made, chutney being one of the good examples. Or if you're talking about water which was not in bottled water, you find this organism finding its way. Or if you have certain nourishing foods like salads, to take care that you don't get any other problem, salad that was washed in a particular quality of water, of poor quality water, but doesn't show up because of the wonderful colors and the clean appearance that it has, would make you think you're safe, but it's just the salad that would have resulted in almost a choleric-like illness. And this is really something that I would like to, quote one of our former late Professor J.V. Bhatt, who often said it is better to drink a dirty-looking glass of tea somewhere rather than a sparkling glass of water without knowing what it contains. And this is very true because these organisms can cause sometimes, severe illnesses. Apart from bacteria that are there, you also have viruses in the waters. Polio is something we're all very aware of. We also know about the viruses that cause jaundice, the hepatitis virus. Now, all of this we need to know in great detail because something that is taking a long time to cause an illness may be missed out as being the criminal in a situation. And therefore, we need to always know the history of the water that we have taken, which is why today we rely a lot on bottled water. How reliable the bottled water is another question. But then if we look at some of the countries, including India, people who depend a lot on shellfish, that actually, concentrates a lot of the organism from the water, like the oysters or clams, or in the coastal areas when people fish, all of this can carry with them many pathogenic organisms. Now you can see one such illness is due to Vibrio vulnificus, which is a septic condition that has resulted, and this is, I shouldn't say always fatal. It's very rarely that one is able to come out of an infection that would have even, it's not really more the intestinal diarrhea, but extraintestinal infection or the penetration from outside that result. You can also have trematode parasites that are there in the water that develop. Now, there's two which we happen to study through a big EU project, was Clonorchis sinensis and Opisthorchis viverrini, because they were associated with cholangiocarcinoma in countries like Thailand, Korea, as well as China. But we have no records of it because we don't have a very powerful surveillance program with regard to such parasites. But I'm sure it will be a case of seek and ye shall find. But it's water as the medium that is promoting, and you can see how there'll be a primary host, there'll be a secondary host, and man, sometimes human beings become the host where the illness is reflected. And therefore, briefly looking at the factors that impact the quantity or the sources of these contaminants is shown in this diagram, where you see that all of these problems are a consequence of, say, global warming, you have climate change, industrial processes, agriculture trends, population growth, conservation, and we cannot escape all of this because they are a part of development. And if there has been some respite from most of these, it has been during COVID times when people are trying to go back to nature, and all of us must have received umpteen WhatsApp messages where we see animals that were never spotted before being seen, or birds that were never chirping before, now chirping at the backyard, trees not being cut because there haven't been people to cut the tree and to develop a lot of urban sites. But if you look at the various sources we have just spoken about, you can see that you can have chemicals, heavy metals, you can have pathogens about which I already briefly mentioned. If there are industries where there is a lot of aerial contamination, you have acidification in the environment resulting in acid rain. And I will briefly be talking about one of the most important aspects of water and how the food that is grown in the water, like the shellfish or the fish, can be a source of algal toxins. And in most cases, there is no antidote. And we in India also have witnessed a lot of such, not a lot really, but periodic outbreaks due to these biotoxins. Of course, yes, this is just how really there should be an ideal way how we have it. But you see, you can have animals giving rise to a lot of dung and contaminants coming along with it. You have household waste, you have pesticides that are used during agriculture, and all this intensive farming results in a lot of pollutants finding their way to the water body. And the food grown in all these sectors, whether it is the land food or the food in the aquatic environment, it comes back to the human, all magnified. So there are many causes, and I already mentioned about some of them, but we also contribute. We never realize that each household has such a lot of sewage, such a lot of domestic waste, such a lot of, I should say, solid waste that is generated. I wouldn't say there is no effort, there is, but we still have a long way to go. And the government, when the Prime Minister took over, started talking about pollution, cleanliness, it seemed strange because the whole world was coming to know that we were not as clean as they thought India was. But I think it is the duty of each one of us to see how we can add value to those concepts by appropriate disposal of sewage waste, by having septic tanks, or having proper treatment of the sewage waste before they are let off. It is not just about satisfying agencies that are analyzing the effluent or giving a certificate that it's fine, but it is about a conscious effort to see that we leave our own environment in a better shape for the future. Well, this is not a site that we are not familiar with. every one of us in our own cities or villages to a lesser extent, but in all the cities I've seen lots and lots of all these contaminants. And I said I will briefly talk about harmful algal blooms. So what is this bloom? Right now we've been hearing how in the western coastal waters, of course, there has been intense rainfall. This is a case of water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. On the land side, you have a lot of water accumulating in areas, and all the anthropogenic waste, especially sewage material, mixing with all of the good water that may be there, and therefore becoming unfit. But in the environment, the sea environment or the lake environment, when there are periods of extreme heat followed by extreme lowering of temperatures, which has been the case in the last 3 weeks, at least along the west coast, you find that they predispose the waters to what is referred to as blooms. In the former years, they were called red tides because the pigmented algae gave rise to a red coloration, but now we see a lot of green coloration. And for, of course, historical purposes, we continue to call them red tide. But these blooms that occur bring about a lot of devastation in the environment. It could lead to oxygen depletion, bringing about death of the fish and a consequent problem of food security, food not being available, seafood. But you can have also a lot of toxins that they produce. And if we look at some of the data that we have in the last 30 years on the difference that has occurred in the number of toxins that are reported from all parts of the world, in India, the reports are there, and I can vouch for it because we have published them. But you will see that it won't be shown in the map at all. So that means we need to really look a lot into all of that for the public health purpose, because these algae, their harmful effects could be a lot more than even what happens in the land. So they result, yes, in deterioration of the coastal recreational waters, shellfish toxicities, which I mentioned. So more than about 4,000 marine algae have been recorded, but not all of them are toxic, but about 200 have been reported as harmful. We use the word harmful because if they are not toxic to the human, they could still be harmful to the environment, the fish that grow by depleting the oxygen due to their large number. Now, the ones that produce toxin have devastating effects because people can be affected, because some of them are neurotoxins, some of them are cardiotoxins, many of them are hepatotoxins. They're also recorded in fresh waters. There's aphanosimonon, fluorosacque, and then you have some of the toxins like microcystin that bring about skin irritations, or some of the respiratory problems that arise due to the inhalation of some of the aerosols of these toxic species have also resulted in severe illnesses. In Mangalore, as well as in other parts on the west coast, ciguatera toxicity was reported about 3 years ago by many centers, and many people were ill. And this was probably the first reported outbreak of ciguatera toxin. But we cannot forget how about, during 1982, there was an outbreak of paralytic shellfish toxin. As the word suggests, it is a neurotoxin. But the type of neurotoxicity that it produces is there is transient paralysis while the person remains conscious all the while. Now, if they recover after consumption of toxic shellfish, if they recover within the first 10 to 12 hours, then the prognosis is good. Otherwise, invariably, it results in death of the individual. Now, this is a very serious public health problem. When it was first reported in some of the areas like Lepro Basin, they had quiescence of the problem for almost 15 to 20 years. Any other country would have thought it is not of significance, left it. But we know North America and Canada, the developing countries, where probably every life is so important that they continued monitoring of the toxins month after month, only to realize that after about 15 years it recurred, and then it recurred again after 10 years, and then it became an annual phenomenon, so much so that now there is always shellfishery banned due to the presence of this toxin, because some of these toxic algae are constantly found in those waters. They go into a state of cessation and they remain as cysts. But how has it been spreading worldwide? The increased maritime activities, the movement of cysts from one continent to another have probably resulted in more and more countries far away from where they were reported seeing such toxicities where people consume cooked or uncooked, it's the same, which means cooking does not destroy these toxins. On the contrary, in countries like India, if we add tamarind or lime and consume it, it would add to the toxicity. Paratic shellfish toxin is extracted in acid and then, of course, tested in mouse. It's very rapid. You can get the results within 30 minutes, but having a will to analyze and to see that it's not there is very important. We have recorded sporadic toxicities in 1982, and then there was in 87, and then Kerala had a big toxic outbreak of PSP. But then there hasn't been an annual program of surveillance for this toxin. But sometimes in countries like Philippines, several hundred people died due to consumption because there is no way physically it shows in its appearance the presence of the toxin. And as I said, cooking also does not destroy, and therefore monitoring the waters regularly, monitoring the toxin levels once in 15 days in all the places where shellfish is consumed would be paramount to protecting public health. And all this comes from the water. So the economic effects have been studied in some countries that have, a kind of record, and in I think in United States they found that there was public health cost loss accounting for 45%, commercial fisheries impacts, tourism impact, the monitoring cost. When you look at the monitoring cost in comparison to all the other costs that have been valued, you find that it is a pittance, and therefore it would be in the fitness of things, this being World Food Day and food being very important and food from sea being very, very important, not only for domestic consumption but also for export, that we start a concerted program in the country on surveillance and, of course, regular monitoring. These are all, of course, the various toxins that are associated. Some of them result in death, some of them result in illness, some of them are causing problems like memory loss. One of them is the domoic acid group that is associated with the presence of NUCSER in the waters. In fact, very often when studying this toxin, whenever I have forgetfulness, I've been wondering if I have been taking waters with NUCSER in this, because I'm sure all students feel they have memory loss, especially during examination times. Now, if I look at some of the stories that I mentioned, see, paratic shellfish toxin in 1970, look at the very faint records and just look at it in 2006. And India is also on the map, it has been reported, but it's much, much more now. And if you take diuretic shellfish toxin, it's the same case. So if you study it, yes, it's there, but we tend to always miss out on small illnesses that may happen. A diarrhea for a day is just forgotten after eating food, and if you return to normalcy the next day. But it may be important to look at it carefully, because the long-term effects of many of these low molecular weight toxins is very important. We know how today COVID has created havoc, but everyone is more worried about what is going to be the long-term effect in individuals, the asymptomatic people as well as the symptomatic people. So the low molecular weight materials have no antidote. Now, this is a big lesson, and therefore public health people who are listening to this talk will realize even more how it is important for us to introduce monitoring programs and surveillance to be in place in order to record and to take care of public health. Likewise, for amnesic shellfish poison, yes, the algae has been reported in India by us, but we have not looked at any outbreak here. Interestingly, the first outbreak of this was reported in Canada, and I'm very proud that he was an Indian in Canada, of course, Dr. Subbarao, Durvasala Subbarao, who reported it along with colleagues. It's always a matter of pride when our own people are also in different parts of the world working in such a. Then this is toxin poisoning, neurotoxic shellfish poisoning, ciguatera poisoning. Now you don't see it on the India map, but this was reported, this map was prepared much before it happened in the west coast of India. So Kerala reported, we reported, and also North Karnataka there was report. And in Kerala, of course, at Cochin, they have been also doing work with this particular toxin. Our group also has been working on it. And these are very interesting toxins because you don't get the right standards for these toxins. So we are still at a stage when the world is researching because there are newer and newer types. And it is here that tracing, tracking, traceability becomes very important. Now, why did this not occur before and now it's happening in some of the places? Now, we're very happy to see in the markets very huge snapper fish that are being sold, but these fish are caught in places where there are coral reefs, and these fish feed on smaller fishes that feed on the plankton that are responsible for this toxin. And then these fish carry a lot of this toxin, and it's mainly in the head portion and in the viscera. Viscera may be removed and thrown, but the head also is not consumed. But in some parts of our country and in different parts of the world, like French Polynesia and all, the head is consumed. And it is all those who ate these huge fish with huge heads that had the serious problem, with even NITE hospital recording overnight 100 cases of people who were affected from near Ullal, Tokkottu, etc. Of course, I told you also about other aspects. Fish kills have been reported from time to time. Now they affect because no fish means no protein food. And there are a lot of families that are dependent on fish as food. And the people who sell fish, their livelihood depends on the fish that they catch. And fish kills really results in we not having a contingency plan even to address it. And therefore, these concentrations of toxic microalgae, which precede critical levels of the toxin, need to be examined. And microalgal monitoring allows the management options to be considered. Of course, these are all, multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary subjects. The algologists, people who go out into the sea, people who do the plankton sampling have to be watching that. The laboratories have to be looking at the toxin. The public health specialists, the community science departments of the hospitals have to be educating people on this, because it is a social science problem also with industry, especially the small scale fishery industry and the artisanal fishermen becoming up in arms when you report these toxicities and their livelihood is affected. So of course, this includes part of what I already mentioned. So because the observations do not reflect the toxins that may be present, it's very important to use science, good science, to look at it. And okay, these are just pictures to show how really all the effects of water pollution and the treatment system that have to be in place if we have to see that health problems do not occur. And why so? Because there is a global threat to all life on Earth, and the source is water. We all hear about plastic pollution, but every chemical that goes into the water, the household detergent that carries with it, maybe the nonylphenol, or if you take the glyphosate that is sprinkled as a pesticide to the soil, which may find its way to the crop and eventually to the humans, all the endosulfan that is sprayed, every one of them will find ultimately their way to the water, and then it comes back to us either in the form of drinking water or in the form of food that is grown in the water or the agricultural produce. So with many sources of pollution affecting it, also from the air, the acid rain that I mentioned, we need to really have a lot of green belt areas. Now, we may always wonder how the industrialized nations have taken care of all this. Well, every industry abroad, because of the education of the people and the political will, there is the green belt area and the effluent treatment plant that is managed. Here, we sometimes tend to have an eye wash, which we should not. And all of our people, the people who run the industry, the people who do the monitoring, must take care to see that ultimately it's the human race that tends to be protected. So I think you can see the fish. If it is this cartoon, really shows how some of the fish are growing better. We hear about sewage-fed ponds. Maybe some of the fish are telling the other pollution here is tastier because the sewage material is falling there. But then those fish will be having a lot of pathogens also, and therefore all of the microbiological analysis, chemical analysis, or standards that are being laid down by institutes like the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, because are very, very important. We know all the time about the FDA, and we all the time know about the EPA, but our own country is getting stronger by the organizations and by having people at the helm of affairs who are looking to see how they can make the world a better place. We need to join hands in that particular task that they have undertaken. So there are a lot of diseases associated. So I would just like to say the profound influence of water supply and quality on public health is very, very important. Food is grown in polluted waters, yes, but how can they be clean? We heard our previous speakers tell a lot of us about the modern technologies, and the most important would be the wash water that you use. We are asked all the time to keep water for posterity because water is scarce as well. So what you need is more water, yes, but safe water, because a lot of fecal oral route of diseases and the classic waterborne disease cycles are there all the time, resulting in a lot of mortality among the newborns, among people who may be immunocompromised and succumbing. So improvement in water supplies can happen. But when we say safe water and we say bottled water and take it in plastic, we are giving rise to, say, pollution, which is even worse, and therefore plastic pollution. So we have to address this problem by really adopting methods which are practical, avoiding pollution by having good treatment plants, whether it is for sewage treatment or industrial effluent treatment, or monitoring the air quality, the water quality periodically through, of course, standardized techniques that are in place. The country has all the capability, and I think World Food Day is probably the best time to speak on this role of water being so very important in the role of food production and in preserving human life. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Yes, we have run a lot out of time. I'm sure we don't have any time for questions, but all of you who have put your questions in the chat box, we will keep it and respond to you at some other time, or build up a type of interactive platform where Professor Dave, Professor Iram, all of them can address the questions. At this moment, all of you have only received congratulatory messages. As one of the organizers, I can only, of course, say that I'm very gratified that you have found time to participate in. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, ma'am. You have rightly conveyed to us the message that your water is the world's first and foremost medicine. Professor Dr. Indrani Karnasagar is a woman of distinct vision and an idol of knowledge and experience and an inspiration to all of us here at NUTEC. I would like to close this webinar by thanking our participants for their attention and our resource persons, Professor Dr. Idya Karnasagar, Dr. S. Dave, Dr. Iram Rao, and Professor Dr. Indrani Karunasagar. Your willingness to share your time and expertise in this field has been critical to the success of this event. Thank you all once again.